Willie Thompson's hands were steady as a surgeon as he ran the straight razor across Bumpy Johnson's throat. 40 years cutting hair in Harlem, 40 years keeping secrets. But today, Willie had one secret that could get Bumpy Johnson killed. 3 men had just walked through the door. 3 men Willie had never seen before. 3 men wearing long coats in spring weather. And Willie knew the way every man in Harlem knew what those coats were hiding. The first gunman locked the front door. The second pulled the blinds. The third stood directly behind Bumpy's chair, his hand inside his coat, grip wrapped around something cold and final. Bumpy sat there, eyes closed, hot towel on his face, completely vulnerable. The man behind him drew his pistol, pressed it to the back of Bumpy's head, cocked the hammer. "Don't move, Willie," the gunman whispered. "Just keep cutting. This ain't about you." The room was silent. 3 against 1. Bumpy was unarmed, outgunned, trapped. And then Bumpy spoke. 3 words. Calm as Sunday morning. "Closer, Willie." What happened in the next 47 seconds would become one of the most legendary moments in Harlem history. 3 gunmen walked into that barber shop. But when the smoke cleared, when the sirens faded, only one man walked out alive. And it wasn't any of the 3 with guns. What nobody knew, what the streets still whisper about to this day, is that Bumpy Johnson knew those men were coming before they even got dressed that morning. To understand what happened in Willie Thompson's barbershop that afternoon, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1957 and why certain men in New York had decided he needed to die no matter the cost. By the spring of 1957, Bumpy Johnson had become something the Italian mob couldn't comprehend. A black man they couldn't control, couldn't corrupt, and couldn't kill. He'd been running Harlem's numbers racket for over 2 decades. Numbers wasn't just gambling, it was hope. Every morning, black folks from 110th to 155th would place their bets. A nickel here, a dime there, on 3 digits that could change their week. Those nickels added up. By 1957, the numbers game in Harlem was pulling in over $20 million a year. That's $20 million the Italian families wanted. But the numbers operation was just the surface. What made Bumpy Johnson truly dangerous was something the mob couldn't understand. He was beloved. When the city tried to shut down black-owned businesses on 125th Street, Bumpy made phone calls. The harassment stopped. When families got eviction notices during the winter, Bumpy paid their rent. When young men got out of prison and couldn't find work, Bumpy gave them jobs. Not muscle work, real jobs. He'd walk them into barbershops, restaurants, and cleaners, businesses he'd helped save, and vouch for them personally. "This man paid his debt," Bumpy would say. "Now give him a chance to pay his bills." The Italian mob ruled through fear. Bumpy ruled through something far more powerful. Respect. And respect, real respect, can't be bought or beaten into people. By 57, the Genovese family had grown tired of watching their influence stop at 110th Street. Vito Genovese himself had taken over after Lucky Luciano's deportation, and Vito was not a patient man. He saw Harlem as his birthright. $20 million a year just sitting there protected by one man. They'd tried the direct approach twice. The first time, they'd sent 4 collectors to strong-arm one of Bumpy's runners. All 4 went to St. Luke's Hospital that night. The second time, they'd attempted to bribe a Harlem councilman to shut down Bumpy's operations through city permits. 3 days later, that councilman found photos on his desk. Photos his wife would not appreciate. The permits were approved by noon. Bumpy wasn't just a gangster. He was a strategist who saw 3 moves ahead while his enemies were still deciding which piece to touch. So the Genovese family tried a new approach. They'd hire outsiders. Men with no connection to New York. Men Bumpy's network wouldn't recognize. They found 3 brothers from Philadelphia, S. Marco and Dominic Carbone. Small-time muscle trying to make a name. The kind of men who do anything for a payday. The price, $30,000 split 3 ways, plus a territory in Brooklyn. Once the job was done, the target, Bumpy Johnson. Any time, any place, any method. Just make sure he was dead before the week was out. The Carbonas took 3 days to study Bumpy's routine. They learned he ate breakfast at the same diner every morning. They learned he conducted business at Small's Paradise in the evenings. And they learned something else, something that made them smile. Every Thursday afternoon, without fail, Bumpy Johnson went to Willie Thompson's Barbershop on 182nd Street. Same chair, same time. 2 hours of cutting, shaving, and conversation. For 2 hours every Thursday, Bumpy was stationary, predictable, vulnerable. Or so they thought. What the Carbonis didn't know, what Vito Genovs didn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson had one rule that had kept him alive for 25 years. Trust nobody completely, but know everybody. Absolutely. March 11, 1957, Philadelphia. The meeting took place in the back room of a social club on South 9th Street. Vito Genovese didn't attend himself. He never dirtied his hands directly. Instead, he sent his underboss, Tony Salerno, to handle the transaction. Sal Carboni was the oldest at 34. He did the talking. 3 men, 3 days, 1 target, Salerno explained, laying out a photograph of Bumpy on the table. This is Ellsworth Johnson. They call him Bumpy. Why Bumpy? Marco asked. He's got a bump on the back of his head. Childhood thing. Don't let the name fool you. This man is the most dangerous individual north of 96th Street. He's got eyes everywhere. Cops, politicians, street sweepers. Everyone in Harlem owes him something. Then how do we get close? Dominic, the youngest at 26, leaned forward. Cerno smiled. That's why we hired you. Nobody in New York knows your faces. You're ghosts. You get in, you handle business, you disappear back to Philly. By the time anyone knows what happened, you're 300 meters away. He slid an envelope across the table. $15,000 half up front. The rest when we see the body in the papers, Cerno said. Don't make me come looking for it. Hess opened the envelope, counted the bills. His brothers watched. We've done hits before, Sal said slowly. But this one feels different. What aren't you telling us? Salerno's jaw tightened. What I'm telling you is that better men have tried. Men who knew the streets, knew the players. All of them failed. Some of them disappeared. Others, well, let's just say they left New York with fewer fingers than they arrived with. And you think we can do what they couldn't? I think Bumpy Johnson has never seen your faces. I think he doesn't know you exist. And I think that's the only advantage anyone has ever had against him. Don't waste it. The brothers drove to New York the next morning. They rented a room in a flop house on the Lower East Side, far from Harlem. For 3 days, they watched, they photographed, they planned. By Wednesday night, they had their approach. The barbershop, Sal said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the motel bed. Thursday afternoon, he's in that chair for 2 hours. 1 door in the front, 1 in the back. We lock the front, cover the back. 3 guns on 1 man in a chair. He's got nowhere to go. What about witnesses? Dominic asked. The barber? S shrugged. The barber's nobody. He sees nothing. If he's smart, he'll keep cutting hair like nothing happened. If he's not, he made a gun with his fingers. Then there's 1 less witness. Marco pulled back the slide on his .45, checking the chamber. I've never killed a famous man before. By Thursday night, he won't be famous anymore, S replied. He'll just be dead. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that by Wednesday night, Bumpy Johnson had already received 3 separate warnings about their presence. The cab driver who picked them up from Penn Station, the hotel clerk who rented them their room, the newspaper vendor on the corner of 132nd Street who'd watched them watching the barbershop. Bumpy knew he'd known since Monday. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 25 years in Harlem by fighting every threat that came his way. He survived by understanding something most men never learned. The most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's information. While the Carbonis were drawing their little map, Bumpy was in his office above Small's Paradise, listening to Jerome Patterson, the same cab driver who'd picked the brothers up from Penn Station. 3 white boys, Jerome said, Italian accents. Talked about Philly the whole ride. Asked about the neighborhood. Asked about the barbershops. Bumpy nodded slowly. Barbershops? Yes, sir. One of them had a photograph. Tried to hide it, but I saw it in the mirror. Let me guess. My photograph. Jerome just nodded. Bumpy handed him $50. You never drove those men. You were off duty. Understand. After Jerome left, Bumpy sat in silence for nearly an hour. He could have had those 3 boys killed that night. One phone call, 3 bodies in the East River by morning. The Genovese family would never even know what happened to their hired guns. But Bumpy understood something deeper. If he killed these 3 quietly, Genovese would just send 3 more, then 3 after that. The only way to end this was to send a message so loud, so permanent, that no one would ever try again. The next morning, Bumpy visited Willie Thompson's barber shop. Not for a cut, just for a conversation. Willie had been cutting hair in Harlem since 1917. He'd seen everything. He'd survived everything. More importantly, he'd served in the First World War, 364th Infantry Regiment, the Buffalo Soldiers. Willie Thompson was 62 years old, but his hands were still strong and his instincts were sharper than any of his razors. There's going to be some trouble tomorrow, Bumpy said quietly, sitting in his regular chair. 3 men. They're coming for me. Willie didn't stop sweeping. Police trouble or street trouble? Street? Italian money? Philadelphia soldiers. And what do you need from me? Bumpy looked at him in the mirror. I need you to trust me, Willie. When they walk in, you keep cutting. You keep calm. When I say closer, you hit the floor. Understand? Willie paused, looked at Bumpy's reflection. Mr. Johnson, I cut your hair for 15 years. Never once did you give me a reason to doubt you. And tomorrow won't be the first time. That night, Bumpy made his preparations. He had 2 of his men position themselves across the street, not to intervene, but to watch, to witness. He had another man in the apartment above the barber shop, and beneath the barber's chair, held in place by 2 strips of electrical tape, Bumpy secured a small .32 caliber revolver. The trap was set. Or Bumpy Johnson wasn't walking into an ambush, he was creating one. Thursday morning, Bumpy ate breakfast at his usual diner. He made his usual rounds. He arrived at Willie's barber shop at 2:30 p.m., exactly as he had every Thursday for 15 years. Willie draped the cape over his shoulders, littered his face with warm shaving cream, and began the slow, careful work of running a straight razor along Bumpy's jaw. At 2:42 p.m., the front door opened. 3 men walked in, long coats, cold eyes. The first one locked the door behind them. March 14, 1957, 2:47 p.m. The barber shop fell silent. 2 other customers, a school teacher and a postal worker, sat frozen in their waiting chairs. Sal Carbone stood by the door. Marco moved to cover the back exit. Dominic, the youngest, the most eager, walked directly behind Bumpy's chair. Willie's razor paused against Bumpy's cheek. His eyes met Bumpy's in the mirror. Bumpy gave an almost imperceptible nod. Keep cutting. Dominic reached into his coat, drew the .45, pressed the barrel to the back of Bumpy's head. Don't move, Willie, he whispered. Just keep cutting. This ain't about you. The room was silent, except for the tick of the clock on the wall. The schoolteacher was shaking. The postal worker had closed his eyes. S stepped forward. Mr. Johnson, you know why we're here. Bumpy's eyes remained closed. The hot towel still covered half his face. I've been waiting for you since Monday. S's confidence flickered. What? The cab from Penn Station, the hotel on Delancey, the newspaper stand on the corner. Bumpy's voice was quiet, calm as still water. You think you can move through my neighborhood without me knowing? Dominic pressed the gun harder. Doesn't matter what you know, you're still going to die. Bumpy opened his eyes, looked at Dominic in the mirror. Son, I've had guns pointed at me by better men than you. They're all in the ground. You want to join them? Pull that trigger. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Bumpy spoke again. 3 words. calm as Sunday morning. Closer, Willie. Willie dropped like a stone. The towel fell from Bumpy's face. In one motion, faster than any of the Carbones could process. Bumpy's hand shot under the chair, ripped the .32 from its tape, and fired. The first shot caught Dominic in the chest. He stumbled backward, gun clattering to the floor. Marco raised his weapon. Bumpy was already spinning in the chair, firing again. The bullet took Marco in the shoulder, sent him crashing through the back door into the alley. S, frozen by the door, finally drew his gun. But before he could aim, the front window exploded inward. Bumpy's men from across the street. 2 shotguns. The message was clear. S dropped his weapon, raised his hands. The whole thing had taken 47 seconds. Bumpy stood up slowly, removed the barber's cape, walked calmly towards S, who was shaking so badly he could barely stand. "I want you to understand something," Bumpy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I could have killed you Monday. I could have killed you Tuesday. I'll let you live long enough to walk through that door so you could see this moment." He leaned closer, close enough that S could smell the shaving cream. "Go back to Philadelphia. Go back to Vito Genovese. Tell him what happened here today. Tell him I knew about his plan before his soldiers left the train station. Tell him I let them come to me. Tell him I was never the one who was trapped." Bumpy paused, looked directly into S's terrified eyes. "You tell him I said Harlem bleeds for no one." S was crying now, actually crying, tears streaming down his face. And as Bumpy's voice dropped even lower, "If anyone from the Genovese family sets foot in my neighborhood again, I won't give a warning. I won't send a message. I'll just send bodies. Do we understand each other?" S nodded. He couldn't speak. "Then walk. Don't run. Walking shows respect. Running shows guilt. And right now, the only thing keeping you alive is my respect for the code." S walked out the front door. His legs barely held him. Dominic Carbone died on the barbershop floor. Marco Carbone bled out in the alley before the ambulance arrived. Sal. Carbone took a train back to Philadelphia that night and never returned to New York. Willie Thompson swept up the broken glass, wiped down his chair, and opened for business the next morning. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. By nightfall, every hustler from Baltimore to Boston had heard the story. 3 gunmen walked into Bumpy Johnson's barber shop. Only the barber walked out alive, and he swept up the mess like it was just another day. The Genovese family called an emergency meeting the following week. Vito himself was silent for most of it. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. This man knew. He knew before our people left Philadelphia. He knew when they arrived. He knew every step they took, and he let them walk into that barber shop anyway. He shook his head. What are we supposed to do with a man like that? Tony Salerno had no answer. "We leave Harlem alone," Vito finally said. "There's money everywhere in this city. We focus on the Bronx, Queens, the waterfront. But Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. It always did." It was the second time in a decade that the Italian mob had backed down from a territorial dispute without a single concession from the other side. As for Sal Carbone, he returned to Philadelphia a broken man. He quit the life entirely, opened a hardware store in South Jersey, lived quietly for another 30 years. The story goes that whenever someone mentioned Bumpy Johnson's name, S would leave the room without a word. Willie Thompson continued cutting hair until 1972. Every Thursday, Bumpy sat in that same chair in that same spot until the day he died. And above Willie's mirror, in small letters that most customers never noticed, were 5 words that Bumpy had told him to put there after that day. Harlem bleeds for no one. The story of the barbershop isn't just about violence, it's about vision. Bumpy Johnson understood something that most men miss their entire lives. True power isn't about what you can do to your enemies. It's about what your enemies believe you can do. It's about being 3 moves ahead. It's about turning their ambush into your statement. 3 gunmen walked into that barbershop thinking they had the advantage. They had the numbers. They had the guns. They had the element of surprise. But Bumpy had something they couldn't see coming. He'd let them come.